There's security camera footage that, once you see it, you can't unsee. On March 19, 2024, a home surveillance system in Brandon, Mississippi, captured something that would shock the entire country. A teenage girl walking through her kitchen, gun hidden behind her back. 3 seconds later, gunshots, then silence. Then the girl returns to the kitchen like nothing happened, texts on her phone, plays with the family dogs, acts completely normal. Except her mother is dead in the next room, shot in the face, twice. This is the Carly Gregg case. And that footage became the most damning piece of evidence in one of Mississippi's most disturbing trials in decades. Before we go deeper into what that video shows and what it means, if you want to stay updated on cases like this where the evidence speaks louder than any confession ever could, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because what we're about to break down will change how you think about surveillance footage in criminal cases. And drop a comment telling us, should teenagers who commit murder as adults be sentenced as adults? This case forces us to answer that question. The video exists because of a kitchen renovation. Ashley Smylie, a 40-year-old math teacher at Northwest Rankin High School, had recently installed a security camera in her kitchen. Not because she didn't trust her family, not because she feared break-ins, just a normal home security measure that many families take. A simple camera, motion-activated, recording to the cloud, the kind of thing you set up and forget about, until it captures something you never imagined. Ashley had no idea that camera would document the last moments of her life, that it would show her own daughter preparing to kill her, that it would become Exhibit A in a murder trial that would grip the nation. March 19, 2024 started as a Tuesday like any other in the Smylie household in Brandon, Mississippi. Brandon is a suburb of Jackson, the state capital. It's a quiet community. Good schools, safe neighborhoods, the kind of place where people move to raise families. Where teachers like Ashley Smylie dedicate their careers to educating the next generation. Where you don't expect violence. Where you certainly don't expect a 14-year-old girl to murder her own mother. Ashley Smylie went to work that morning at Northwest Rankin High School. She taught mathematics. According to colleagues and students, she was dedicated, caring, patient. The kind of teacher students remember years later. She had 2 daughters. One had passed away at a young age. The other was Carly Gregg, 14 years old. A student, by all accounts bright and capable. Ashley was married to Heath Smylie, Carly's stepfather. He worked as a physical therapist at a clinic about 5 minutes from their home. Heath and Ashley had built a life together. A blended family. Heath had given Ashley a .357 Magnum handgun. For protection, for safety, for peace of mind. That gun was kept in the house. Accessible, legal, registered. It was supposed to keep Ashley safe. Instead, it would be used to kill her. Carly Gregg was a troubled teenager, though the extent of her struggles wasn't fully visible to everyone around her. She was on medication for depression, escitalopram, an SSRI antidepressant. She had been experiencing symptoms that concerned those close to her. Mood swings, eating disorder issues. She had engaged in self-harm, cutting herself. She reported hearing voices. She had difficulty sleeping. These are serious mental health symptoms, red flags that something was deeply wrong. Carly had been receiving treatment. She saw a therapist, Dr. Andrew Clark, a child psychologist. Just one day before March 19th, Carly had a session with Dr. Clark. He would later testify that she seemed emotionally stable at that session. Nothing about her presentation suggested she was on the verge of violence. No immediate warning signs that within 24 hours she would commit murder. This is one of the tragic realities of mental illness and violence. Sometimes there are clear escalating signs. Sometimes there aren't. Sometimes someone can seem fine in a clinical setting while experiencing internal chaos that leads to catastrophic action. Carly was also using marijuana. This was not widely known. She kept it hidden, concealed in her bedroom along with e-cigarettes and what were described as burner phones. Secret teenage behavior. The kind of thing parents discover and address. The kind of thing that leads to difficult conversations and consequences. The kind of thing that can trigger conflict in a household, but not the kind of thing that typically leads to murder. On the afternoon of March 19th, something happened that would set events in motion. One of Carly's friends, a student at the same high school where Ashley taught, became aware of the marijuana and drug paraphernalia in Carly's room. This friend made a decision. She told Ashley. She informed Carly's mother that Carly had a significant amount of cannabis hidden in her bedroom. This was not a betrayal in the friend's mind. This was concern. This was doing the right thing. This was trying to help Carly by making sure her mother knew what was happening. The friend had no way of knowing that this information would trigger a chain of events ending in murder. Ashley received this information during the school day. She knew she would need to address it when she got home. She would need to confront Carly, search her room, have a serious conversation about drugs, about honesty, about consequences. This is what responsible parents do. This is what caring mothers do. They don't ignore drug use. They address it head on. Ashley was preparing to be a parent. She had no idea she was walking into danger. Carly learned that her secret had been exposed. Her friend had told her mother. Ashley would be coming home knowing about the marijuana. Carly knew there would be consequences, confrontation, punishment, disappointment. For a teenager already struggling with mental health issues, already on medication that may not have been fully controlling her symptoms, already hearing voices and experiencing dissociation, this created a crisis point. But millions of teenagers get caught with drugs. Millions face parental consequences. They don't murder their mothers. Something else was happening in Carly Gregg's mind that afternoon. Something that would lead her to make a choice that would destroy multiple lives. The surveillance footage begins at approximately 5:05 p.m. The timestamp is visible. The kitchen is empty. Normal afternoon light. A quiet house. Then Carly enters the frame. She's walking, moving with purpose. And behind her back, barely visible in the frame, she's holding something. The gun. The .357 Magnum that Heath had given to Ashley. Carly has retrieved it. She's carrying it. She's concealing it behind her body as she moves through the kitchen. Watch her body language in this footage. This is what made it so chilling to jurors. She's not frantic. She's not visibly upset. She's not moving erratically. She appears calm, deliberate, purposeful. This doesn't look like someone in the grip of uncontrollable psychosis. This doesn't look like someone who has lost touch with reality. This looks like someone executing a plan. She moves out of frame. The camera continues recording the empty kitchen. Then, seconds later, the sound. Gunshots. 3 of them. Loud. Unmistakable. The sound of the .357 Magnum being fired. The sound of Ashley Smylie being murdered in her own home by her own daughter. The audio is clear enough that forensic experts could count the shots. 3 rounds fired. 2 struck Ashley. 1 in the face, another in the face. Fatal wounds. Immediate or near immediate death. Ashley Smylie, 40 years old, math teacher, mother, wife, was executed in her bedroom by a 14-year-old girl who had hidden a gun behind her back moments before. Then Carly returns to the kitchen. This is the part of the footage that prosecutors emphasized heavily at trial. This is the part that the defense struggled to explain. This is the part that convinced many jurors that Carly was not insane, that she knew exactly what she had done. She walks back into frame. The gun is no longer visible. She moves to the area where her phone is. She picks it up. She starts texting. The footage shows her looking at her phone, typing, sending messages, communicating with someone, acting like a normal teenager on her phone, except she has just committed murder seconds ago. Then she interacts with the family dogs, playing, petting them, normal interaction with pets. The dogs don't react to her as if anything is wrong. She's not covered in blood. She's not acting distressed. She's engaging with the animals like she would on any other day. This behavior continued for some time. Carly didn't call 911. She didn't scream for help. She didn't rush to check on her mother. She didn't show any of the immediate panic or remorse you might expect from someone who had just shot their parent. She acted normal, eerily, chillingly normal. The text she was sending during this time became part of the evidence. She was communicating with a friend, a 16-year-old friend. And what she told this friend was shocking. She asked the friend to come over. She said she needed help. When the friend arrived, Carly asked her a question. Have you ever seen a dead body before? Then she showed the friend Ashley's body. She took her friend to see what she had done. The friend would later testify about this at trial, about how Carly was carrying the gun, about how Carly admitted to shooting her mother 3 times, about how Carly said she had 3 more rounds waiting for her stepfather. Think about that. I put 3 in my mom. I got 3 more waiting for my stepdad. This is what Carly told her friend. This is direct evidence of intent. This is evidence of premeditation. This is evidence that she knew exactly what she had done and was planning to do it again. The friend was terrified. She left the house. She didn't know what to do. She was 16 years old, confronted with her friend's confession to murder and threats of more violence. This put her in an impossible situation, but her testimony would become crucial at trial. It corroborated the surveillance footage. It showed Carly's state of mind immediately after the murder. It demonstrated consciousness of guilt and future planning for violence. Meanwhile, Heath Smylie was finishing his workday. He had no idea what had happened at home. He had no idea his wife was dead. He had no idea his stepdaughter was armed and waiting for him. He drove home like he did every day, 5 minutes from his workplace to his house, a normal commute. He pulled into the driveway. He walked to the front door. He opened it. The security footage doesn't show what happened next. The camera is in the kitchen. Heath was entering through the front door. But we know what happened because Heath survived. And because he made a 911 call that was played at trial. As Heath opened the front door, Carly shot him. The gun went off in my face before the door was open, Heath would later testify. She ambushed him. She was waiting. She fired the .357 Magnum at him as he entered his own home. The bullet struck him in the shoulder. A serious wound, but not immediately fatal. Heath was injured, bleeding, in pain, but alive and conscious. What happened next likely saved Heath's life. He's a physical therapist. He's trained in anatomy. He knew the wound was serious but potentially survivable. And he's also an adult man facing a 14-year-old girl. Despite being shot, despite the shock and pain, Heath fought back. He struggled with Carly. He managed to get the gun away from her. He disarmed her. He took control of the weapon. Carly's reaction was to flee. She didn't continue fighting. She didn't try to get the gun back. She ran. She ran through the house. She ran into the backyard. She jumped over the fence. She fled the scene. This is important because it shows her understanding of the situation. She knew she had done something wrong. She knew she needed to escape. She was demonstrating consciousness of guilt. Heath, bleeding from a gunshot wound, now had to process what had just happened. His stepdaughter had just shot him. His wife was somewhere in the house. He needed help. He needed police. He needed medical attention. He pulled out his phone and called 911. The call was played at trial and it's harrowing. Heath is screaming, hysterical, frantic. He's telling the dispatcher that his stepdaughter shot him and his wife. He's saying his wife is dead. He's in shock. He's in pain. He's terrified. This is the sound of a man who has just been shot by a member of his own family and discovered his wife has been murdered. The emotion in his voice is raw and real. There's no question he's experiencing genuine trauma and horror. The dispatcher is trying to get information. Where are you? Are you safe? Where is the shooter? Where is the weapon? Heath is trying to answer, but he's overwhelmed. He's bleeding. He's processing the fact that Carly, this 14-year-old girl he's helped raise, just tried to kill him and succeeded in killing his wife. Deputies from the Rankin County Sheriff's Office responded immediately. Multiple units, lights and sirens. They arrived at the house on Ashton Way to find Heath bleeding from a gunshot wound. They found him with the weapon. He had disarmed Carly and secured the gun. They found Ashley Smiley's body in the bedroom, dead from gunshot wounds to the face. The scene was exactly as Heath had described on the 911 call. Officers also deployed resources to find Carly. She had fled on foot. She jumped a fence into a neighboring property. Sheriff Brian Bailey requested assistance from the Mississippi Highway Patrol. Their helicopter was deployed. Air support to locate a fleeing teenage murder suspect. This is the level of response. This is how seriously law enforcement took the threat. Carly was located and apprehended. She was taken into custody without further incident. She didn't resist arrest. She didn't fight with officers. She was transported to the Rankin County Sheriff's Office. She was 14 years old. She had just murdered her mother and shot her stepfather. She was now facing the criminal justice system. The house became a crime scene. Yellow tape, investigators, forensic technicians. The surveillance camera footage was immediately identified as critical evidence. That video would be downloaded, preserved, analyzed, presented at trial. It would become the single most important piece of evidence in the case. The gun was recovered and processed. Ballistics testing would confirm it was the weapon used in both shootings. Ashley's wounds and Heath's wound matched the caliber. There was no doubt about the weapon. The .357 Magnum that was supposed to protect the family had been turned against them. Ashley's body was examined by the medical examiner. Cause of death was clear. Gunshot wounds to the face. The wounds were fatal. She had died either immediately or within moments. There was nothing that could have been done to save her even if emergency medical services had been called immediately after the shooting. The nature of the injuries made survival impossible. Heath was transported to a hospital. His shoulder wound required surgery. He would survive. He would recover physically. The psychological trauma would be something he'd carry for the rest of his life. He had lost his wife to murder. He had been shot by his stepdaughter. He would have to testify at trial about the worst day of his life, but he survived. Carly was interviewed by investigators. The details of those interviews are not all public. What we know is that she gave statements. She didn't deny shooting her mother and stepfather. There was too much evidence. The surveillance footage, the friend's testimony, Heath's account, the physical evidence. Denying it would be pointless. The question wasn't whether she did it. The question was why, and whether she was criminally responsible. The case drew immediate attention. 14-year-old girl murders her mother, shoots her stepfather. Surveillance footage exists. It's shocking. It's disturbing. It's exactly the kind of case that captures public interest and media coverage. Court TV would eventually broadcast the trial. National news outlets covered it. Social media discussed it extensively. The Carly Gregg case became one of the most talked about criminal cases of 2024. The legal process began. Carly was charged as an adult. This is a critical decision in cases involving juvenile offenders who commit serious violent crimes. In Mississippi, as in many states, prosecutors have discretion to charge certain juvenile offenders as adults, depending on the severity of the crime and the age of the offender. Murder committed by a 14-year-old is exactly the kind of case where adult charges are considered appropriate. Carly was formally indicted on 3 counts: first-degree murder for the death of Ashley Smylie, attempted murder for the shooting of Heath Smylie, and tampering with evidence. The tampering charge related to her actions after the shooting. Specifically, she had hidden the kitchen surveillance camera. She took it down and put it in the refrigerator. She was trying to conceal the evidence. She was trying to hide what the camera had recorded. This demonstrated consciousness of guilt. She knew what she had done was wrong. She knew the footage would incriminate her. She tried to hide it. The defense filed a motion to transfer the case to youth court. This was an attempt to have Carly tried in the juvenile justice system rather than adult criminal court. The juvenile system has different goals: rehabilitation rather than punishment, different sentencing options, the possibility of release before age 21. From a defense perspective, youth court was far preferable to adult court, where Carly faced mandatory life sentences. The court denied the motion. Judge Dewey Arthur ruled that Carly would be tried as an adult in Rankin County Circuit Court. This meant she faced the full weight of adult criminal penalties. If convicted of first-degree murder in Mississippi when tried as an adult, the sentence is mandatory life imprisonment. There's no discretion, no alternative. Life means life. Carly's defense team had a major strategic decision to make. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The surveillance footage alone was nearly impossible to overcome. Multiple witnesses, including the surviving victim. Physical evidence. Forensic evidence. Carly's own statements. A traditional defense arguing she didn't do it or it was an accident would fail immediately. The only viable defense was insanity. Under Mississippi law, a defendant can be found not guilty by reason of insanity if, at the time of the offense, they were unable to distinguish right from wrong due to mental disease or defect. This is a very high bar. It's not enough to have mental illness. It's not enough to be on medication. It's not enough to be experiencing symptoms. The defendant must have been so impaired that they literally could not understand that what they were doing was wrong. The defense strategy became clear. Argue that Carly was experiencing a severe mental health crisis on March 19th, that her symptoms, her medications, her psychological state had reached a point where she was not in control of her actions, that she was experiencing auditory hallucinations, that she was dissociated from reality, that she had no memory of the shooting, that she was legally insane at the moment she pulled the trigger. This is a difficult defense to prove. Juries are skeptical of insanity defenses. The public perception is that defendants fake mental illness to avoid responsibility. Statistics show insanity defenses are rarely successful. But given the evidence in this case, it was the defense's only option. Carly was offered a plea deal. The prosecution was willing to offer terms that would avoid trial. She would plead guilty to the murder of her mother. The attempted murder and tampering charges would be dropped. She would be sentenced to 40 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections. 40 years is a very long sentence, but it's not life without parole. 40 years means the possibility of release eventually. It means not dying in prison. For a 14-year-old, even 40 years means the possibility of freedom before age 60. Carly rejected the plea deal. This was a calculated risk. If she went to trial and won on the insanity defense, she would not go to prison at all. She would be committed to a mental health facility, likely the Mississippi State Hospital at Whitfield. She would receive treatment. She could potentially be released if she was ever deemed to no longer be a danger to herself or others. The upside of an insanity acquittal was enormous. The downside was that if the jury rejected the insanity defense, she would face life without parole. Life. She would die in prison, never be released, never have a life outside prison walls. By rejecting the plea deal, Carly was betting everything on the insanity defense. Her attorneys believed they could convince a jury that she was legally insane on March 19th, that she met the legal definition, that she deserved treatment, not punishment, that she was a mentally ill child, not a cold-blooded killer. The prosecution believed otherwise. They believed the evidence showed a girl who knew exactly what she was doing, who planned it, who executed it, who tried to cover it up, who showed no remorse, who ambushed her stepfather, who invited a friend to see the body, a girl who was troubled, yes, but not insane, a girl who made choices, a girl who should be held accountable. The trial was scheduled for September 2024, almost exactly 6 months after the murder. This is relatively fast for a murder trial. Defense attorneys often seek continuances to have more time to prepare, especially in complex cases involving mental health defenses. But Judge Arthur had a reputation for keeping his docket moving. He does not continue cases, he stated. The defense argued they needed more time to review medical records, more time to conduct evaluations, more time to prepare expert witnesses. The judge denied the continuances. The trial would proceed as scheduled. This became part of the basis for a later appeal. The defense would argue that they were denied adequate time to prepare a constitutionally adequate defense, that the rush to trial prejudiced their client, that in a case of this magnitude involving extensive medical and mental health records, 6 months was insufficient. But the trial went forward. Jury selection began. This is voir dire, the process of questioning potential jurors to determine if they can be fair and impartial. In a high-profile case that had received significant media coverage, finding jurors who hadn't already formed opinions was challenging. The case had been all over local news. People in Rankin County knew about it. They had opinions. Attorneys on both sides questioned potential jurors. Have you heard about this case? Have you formed an opinion? Can you set aside what you've heard and decide based only on the evidence presented at trial? Can you consider an insanity defense fairly? Do you have strong feelings about mental illness and criminal responsibility? These questions help identify jurors who can't be impartial. Both sides can challenge potential jurors for cause if there's a valid legal reason they can't serve. Both sides also get a limited number of peremptory challenges to strike jurors without giving a reason. The goal is to seat 12 jurors and alternates who will listen to the evidence and reach a verdict based on the law. A jury was seated. 12 Rankin County residents. They would hear days of testimony. They would see the surveillance footage. They would listen to the 911 call. They would hear from experts arguing opposite conclusions about Carly's mental state. They would deliberate. They would decide Carly Gregg's fate. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecution went first. They told the jury what they would prove. They described the surveillance footage. They described the 3 gunshots. They described Carly's behavior afterward. They described the ambush of Heath. They described the statement to the friend about having 3 more rounds for the stepfather. They argued this was a girl who knew right from wrong, who made choices, who tried to cover up her crime, not insanity, murder. The defense gave their opening statement. Attorney Bridget Todd argued that Carly was suffering from undiagnosed and untreated mental illness, that she had no desire to hurt her mother or stepfather, that something happened in her brain that day, that she experienced a complete break from reality, that she has no memory of the shooting, that the girl in that surveillance footage was not the real Carly, but someone completely dissociated from herself. She asked the jury to find Carly not guilty by reason of insanity. The prosecution began presenting their case. They called Heath Smylie to the stand. This was one of the most emotional moments of the trial. Heath had to relive the worst day of his life in front of a courtroom full of strangers and cameras. He described coming home from work, opening the door, the gun going off in his face, being shot, struggling with Carly, disarming her, finding his wife dead, calling 911. He was visibly emotional. The jury could see his pain. This was not theoretical. This man had been shot by his stepdaughter and lost his wife. The 911 call was played for the jury. Heath's screaming voice, his terror, his horror. The jury heard it all. It's one thing to read a transcript. It's another thing entirely to hear the raw emotion. To hear someone in the immediate aftermath of being shot and discovering their spouse murdered. The impact on the jury was visible. This was real. This happened. There's no disputing it. The surveillance footage was played. This was the moment the prosecution had been building toward. The jury watched Carly walk through the kitchen with the gun behind her back. They heard the gunshots. They watched her return, text on her phone, play with the dogs, act normal. The footage ran for several minutes. The jury could see it all. They could form their own impressions. They didn't need an expert to tell them what it meant. They could see a girl who appeared calm and purposeful before murder and unnaturally calm after. The friend who Carly invited over was called to testify. This 16-year-old had to describe being asked if she'd ever seen a dead body, being shown Ashley's body, hearing Carly confess to shooting her mother 3 times, hearing Carly say she had 3 more rounds for her stepfather. This testimony corroborated everything else. It showed Carly's state of mind immediately after the murder. It showed she knew what she'd done. It showed she was planning more violence. Law enforcement officers testified about the crime scene, about finding Ashley's body, about apprehending Carly, about processing the evidence, about the gun, about the surveillance camera hidden in the refrigerator. Each piece of evidence was introduced. Each element of the prosecution's case was methodically presented. Then came the battle of the experts. This is where insanity defenses are won or lost. The defense and prosecution each present mental health experts who have evaluated the defendant. These experts give completely opposite opinions about the defendant's mental state. The jury has to decide which expert to believe. The defense called Dr. Andrew Clark. He was Carly's therapist. He had treated her before the murder. He testified about her mental health struggles, the depression, the auditory hallucinations, the self-harm, the eating disorder, the sleep difficulties. He testified that she was on medication that might have worsened some symptoms. He testified that in his professional opinion, Carly was experiencing severe mental illness that could have caused her to lose touch with reality. Dr. Clark testified that Carly told him she had no memory of the shooting, that there was a gap in her consciousness, that she couldn't remember pulling the trigger, that she couldn't remember shooting her mother, that this was consistent with dissociation. That dissociation could be a symptom of her underlying mental illness, that someone who is dissociated might appear calm on surveillance footage while internally being completely disconnected from their actions. The prosecution cross-examined Dr. Clark aggressively. Assistant District Attorney Michael Smith asked pointed questions. You agree that Carly tried to cover up the crime, right? Dr. Clark had to agree. Yes, she hid the camera. If you try to cover up a crime, doesn't that indicate you know what you did? The courtroom went silent. This was the key question. If Carly knew enough to hide the evidence, didn't she know right from wrong? Wasn't she showing consciousness of guilt? Wasn't that the opposite of legal insanity? Dr. Clark tried to explain that it's possible to have complex mental states, that someone can be dissociated during an act but aware afterward. That memory and understanding can come and go. But the damage was done. The prosecution had made their point. Carly knew enough to hide evidence. That suggests she knew what she did was wrong. The prosecution called their own expert, Dr. Jason Pickett, a psychiatrist who had evaluated Carly specifically for this trial. He reviewed all the same records Dr. Clark had. He interviewed Carly. He formed his own opinion, and his opinion was diametrically opposed to Dr. Clark's. Dr. Pickett testified that Carly did not meet Mississippi's legal definition of insanity at the time of the offense. He testified that she knew the nature, quality, and wrongfulness of her actions. He testified that her mental illness, while real, did not render her unable to distinguish right from wrong. He testified that her behavior before, during, and after the shooting demonstrated awareness and intent. Dr. Pickett went further. He testified that Carly exhibited narcissistic tendencies, that her actions were calculated, that he would describe her behavior as diabolical. Diabolical. That's a strong word. It means wicked, cruel, deliberately harmful. The prosecution latched onto this. Carly Gregg is diabolical, not insane, not a victim of mental illness spiraling out of control. Diabolical, evil, making conscious choices to harm. The defense tried to rehabilitate their position. They called additional witnesses, people who knew Carly, people who could testify about her struggles, her erratic behavior in the months before the murder, the voices she heard, the mood swings, the medications that weren't working. They were trying to paint a picture of a deeply troubled girl whose mental illness had reached a crisis point, but the prosecution kept hammering the same points. The surveillance footage, the calmness, the texting, the cover-up, the statements to the friend. I put 3 in my mom, I got 3 more for my stepdad. Does that sound like someone who doesn't know what they're doing? Does that sound like someone who can't distinguish right from wrong? Or does that sound like someone who committed murder and was planning to kill again? Closing arguments arrived. This was each side's final chance to persuade the jury, to tie together all the evidence, to tell a coherent story, to ask for the verdict they wanted. The prosecution's closing argument was direct and powerful. Assistant District Attorney Catherine Newman stood before the jury and reenacted Carly's statement. "I put 3 in my mom and I got 3 more waiting for my stepdad." She looked at the jury. "You think that sounds like an insane person? No, that's consciousness. That's intent. That's someone who knows exactly what they did and exactly what they're planning to do next." She reminded the jury of the surveillance footage, the calm walk, the hidden gun, the return to normal behavior. She reminded them of the hidden camera. Someone who's legally insane doesn't hide evidence. Someone who's legally insane doesn't know they've done something wrong. Carly knew. She tried to cover it up. That's not insanity. That's guilt. She addressed the victim, Ashley Smylie, a teacher, a mother, a wife, murdered in her own home by her own daughter, shot in the face, twice. She deserves justice. Heath Smylie, shot in his own doorway, struggling with his stepdaughter, disarming her, calling for help. He deserves justice. The only just verdict is guilty. The defense's closing argument was emotional. Attorney Kevin Camp pleaded with the jury. Carly is a child. She was 14 years old. She was suffering. She was hearing voices. She was on medication that wasn't working. Something broke inside her that day. She doesn't know what happened. She can't remember shooting her mother. She was having a mental health crisis. Camp argued that Carly deserves treatment, not punishment, that she should be found not guilty by reason of insanity, that she should be committed to Whitfield, the state psychiatric hospital, where she can receive the help she needs. That locking her in prison for life doesn't serve justice. She's sick. She needs healing. He reminded the jury that mental illness is real, that it's not an excuse but an explanation, that we as a society should have compassion for people who are struggling, that a 14-year-old with severe mental health issues who commits violence while in crisis should be treated differently than a cold-blooded killer. We're asking you to find her not guilty by reason of insanity. The jury received their instructions from Judge Arthur. He explained the law. He explained the elements of each charge that must be proven. He explained the standard for legal insanity. He explained that their verdict must be unanimous. All 12 must agree. He sent them to deliberate. The jury deliberated for approximately 2 hours. This is relatively quick for a complex case with an insanity defense. It suggests the jury didn't struggle much with their decision. They reviewed some evidence, they discussed, they reached consensus. They sent word they had a verdict. The courtroom reconvened. Carly was brought in. Her family was there. Heath was there. The media was there. Court TV cameras were rolling. Everyone waited. The judge asked the foreman if they had reached a verdict. "Yes, Your Honor." The verdict form was handed to the judge. He reviewed it. He handed it to the clerk to read aloud. As to count 1, first-degree murder, we, the jury, find the defendant Carly Madison Gregg guilty. Guilty. The jury rejected the insanity defense. They found she knew right from wrong. They found she acted with intent. They found her criminally responsible for her actions. As to count 2, attempted murder, we, the jury, find the defendant Carly Madison Gregg guilty. Guilty again. On both counts of violence. She murdered her mother. She tried to murder her stepfather. The jury believed she was responsible. As to count 3, tampering with evidence, we, the jury, find the defendant Carly Madison Gregg guilty. Guilty on all counts. A complete conviction. The prosecution had proven their case. The jury didn't buy the insanity defense. Carly sobbed as the verdicts were read. Her grandparents were in the courtroom mouthing words of encouragement to her. But she had just been convicted of murder, as an adult, with mandatory sentences. Because Carly was convicted, the trial immediately moved to the sentencing phase. In Mississippi, even when sentences are mandatory, the jury still must formally impose them. Judge Arthur instructed the jury on the sentencing law. For first-degree murder, when tried as an adult, the sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For attempted murder, the sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For tampering with evidence, the sentence can be up to 10 years. The jury deliberated on sentencing for less than an hour. They returned with their decision. As to count 1, first-degree murder, we, the jury, sentenced the defendant Carly Madison Gregg to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As to count 2, attempted murder, we, the jury, sentenced the defendant Carly Madison Gregg to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As to count 3, tampering with evidence, We, the jury, sentenced the defendant, Carly Gregg, to 10 years imprisonment, all sentences to run consecutively. Carly Gregg, at 15 years old, had just been sentenced to die in prison. She will never be released. She will spend every remaining day of her life behind bars. She will never have freedom. She will never have a normal life. She will age and die in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections. Rankin County District Attorney Bubba Bramlett spoke to the media after the verdict. His words were stark and unforgiving. Carly Gregg is evil. That's not easy to say, but the truth of the matter is that sometimes evil comes in young packages, small packages, and this is one of those cases. Evil. He called a 15-year-old girl evil, and he explained that evil sometimes looks young. That age doesn't prevent someone from being capable of terrible things. That Carly made choices, that she deserves the consequences. The defense attorneys vowed to appeal. This was expected. Every defendant convicted of murder has the right to appeal. Attorney Kevin Camp said Carly was doing okay, hanging in there. This was a tough case from the get-go. This jury had a very, very tough decision to make. They believed the jury got it wrong. They believed there were legal errors. They believed Carly deserved a new trial. Carly was transported to the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility in Rankin County, specifically to the Youthful Offender Unit. This is a section for inmates who are under 18 years old. She would remain there until she turned 18, then be transferred to the adult general population. She became inmate number assigned by MDOC. No longer Carly Gregg, teenage girl. Now a convicted murderer serving life without parole. The case sparked intense debate. Should 14-year-olds ever be tried as adults? Should anyone be sentenced to life without parole for crimes committed as a juvenile? Mental health advocates argued that Carly was failed by systems that should have helped her, that her mental illness should have been treated more aggressively, that medication should have been monitored more closely, that warning signs were missed, that a child in crisis became a child in prison when she should have received intensive treatment. Others argued that personal responsibility matters, that mental illness is not an excuse for murder, that Ashley Smylie deserved justice, that Heath Smylie deserved justice, that Carly made choices, that she hid the gun, that she pulled the trigger, that she tried to cover it up, that she planned to kill her stepfather, that these are conscious, intentional acts that warrant punishment regardless of the perpetrator's age. The surveillance footage remains the most discussed element of the case. People who watch it can't unsee it. The casual walk, the hidden gun, the calm return, the normal behavior. It doesn't look like mental illness. It looks like premeditation. It looks like someone executing a plan. Whether that perception is medically accurate is debatable, but the impact on public opinion and on the jury was undeniable. Ashley Smylie's colleagues and students mourned her. She was remembered as a dedicated teacher, someone who cared about her students, someone who made a difference in their lives. Her funeral was held. Her family tried to process the unthinkable, that their daughter, their sister, their loved one had been murdered by her own child. There's no grief manual for that, no roadmap for healing from that kind of loss. Heath Smylie survived physically but carries permanent scars. He lost his wife. He was shot by his stepdaughter. He had to testify about it in court. He had to relive it. The psychological impact is immeasurable. He has to live with the knowledge that someone he tried to raise, someone he helped care for, tried to kill him. That's a trauma that doesn't heal. Carly's appeal was filed in September 2024. Her new attorney, James Murphy, raised multiple arguments. He argued that the trial court used the wrong sentencing framework. He argued that under Mississippi law, juveniles convicted of first-degree murder cannot be sentenced to life without parole, only life in prison. This is a technical legal distinction, but it matters. Life in prison might allow for eventual parole consideration. Life without parole means never. Murphy argued that the sentence was unconstitutional. That sentencing a juvenile to life without parole violates evolving standards of decency. That the Supreme Court has recognized juveniles are different from adults. That their brains are still developing. That they have greater capacity for rehabilitation. That mandatory life without parole for juveniles is cruel and unusual punishment. He also argued that Carly was denied adequate time to prepare her defense. That 6 months was insufficient for a case of this complexity. That the rush to trial prejudiced the defense. That constitutional errors occurred that require a new trial. The prosecution responded vigorously. They argued that Mississippi law clearly allows life without parole for juveniles tried as adults for first-degree murder, that the sentence was appropriate, that Carly had a fair trial, that the jury heard all the evidence and made the right decision. that she deserves to remain in prison for the rest of her life. The Mississippi Supreme Court will eventually rule on the appeal. This could take months or years. Appeals move slowly through the judicial system. Briefs must be filed, oral arguments scheduled, justices must deliberate, a decision must be written. The process is lengthy. During this entire time, Carly remains in prison serving her sentence. If the appeal is successful, several things could happen. The Supreme Court could order a new trial. Carly would be tried again with corrections to whatever errors occurred the first time, or the court could order resentencing. Carly's conviction would stand, but she'd receive a new sentence under a different legal framework. Or the court could remand for other proceedings. If the appeal fails, Carly's conviction and sentence become final. No more appeals on these grounds. She would have exhausted her direct appeal. She could potentially file other types of appeals later, but the chances of success diminish greatly. She would spend the rest of her life in prison. The Carly Gregg case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about juvenile justice, mental illness, and personal responsibility. There are no easy answers. A 14-year-old girl committed murder. That's undeniable. Should she be treated as an adult criminal or as a child in need of help? Should mental illness mitigate responsibility, or is there a point where even mental illness doesn't excuse violence? Should someone sentenced as a juvenile ever receive life without parole, or should there always be hope for rehabilitation and eventual release? These are questions our society continues to grapple with. The Carly Gregg case is just one example. There are others. Teenagers who commit terrible crimes, the justice system struggling to balance punishment and rehabilitation, families destroyed, victims who deserve justice, defendants who may have been failed by mental health systems. What's clear is that March 19, 2024 destroyed multiple lives. Ashley Smylie is dead. Heath Smylie is traumatized. Carly Gregg is in prison for life. Ashley's family grieves. Carly's family grieves. There are no winners, only loss, only pain, only the question of whether anything could have been different. The surveillance footage will remain as evidence of what happened that day. Future juries in future cases might watch it as an example. Law students might study it. Mental health professionals might analyze it. It captured something most people never see: the moments before, during, and after murder, the face of a teenage killer, the cold reality of domestic violence, the permanent record of a family's worst day. Carly Gregg sits in a prison cell, 15 years old when sentenced. She'll be 16 soon, then 20, then 30, then 50, then 70. If she lives a normal lifespan, she'll spend 60 or 70 years behind bars. Most of her life, all of her adult life, every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, all in prison because of what she did on March 19, 2024 when she was 14 years old. Whether that serves justice is a question each person must answer for themselves. Whether it serves society is debatable. Whether it serves Carly, whether it helps her, or simply warehouses her until she dies, is uncertain. What's certain is that it's the law. It's what the jury decided. It's what the judge imposed. And unless the appeals succeed, it's Carly Gregg's reality for the rest of her life. The case is closed in terms of criminal prosecution, but the questions it raises remain open. The debate continues. The laws may change. Society's views on juvenile justice evolve, but for the people directly affected, there's no evolution, only permanence. Ashley Smylie is permanently dead. Carly Gregg is permanently imprisoned. Heath Smylie is permanently traumatized. The surveillance footage is permanently recorded. Some things can't be changed. They can only be remembered.